Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be talking more about healers in Midnight. I got to test out a couple of healers a bit further, and that includes Resto Shaman, Resto Druid and Preservation Evoker. And in this video I'm going to be talking about the good, the bad, some of the changes that happened to them recently, and how they felt based on some of my dungeon testing. Why only 3 healers? Well, I didn't get to test other healers as much as I would like to, and I'm going to be testing more. I'm going to be making more videos, summary videos, comparison videos, so if you want to be updated, make sure to subscribe. So let's go and get started. So let's start off with Resto Shaman. Now, I made a couple of videos about Shaman because initially Blizzard pruned Shamans in such a way that there was a big outroar. A lot of people were really upset about the amount of abilities that are being removed. Probably most notable ones would be something like Cloudburst Totem, maybe Ancestral Protection Totem. You could argue also the fact that they're removing a lot of the buffs that you need to track, specifically things like Tidebringer or High Tide. There is a lot of players who are kind of upset about what the gameplay might look like, so Blizzard acknowledged that and they basically introduced some of the new abilities, or brought back some of the abilities in terms of Unleash Life. Now, Unleash Life is probably not the most favorite ability for Resto Shamans, depending on who you ask, because let's be honest, Unleash Life is on a GCD. It basically means, or you use it in order to buff your next ability, because the initial heal is not all that amazing, so it just felt a little bit clunky. I was testing Resto Shaman and Unleash Life. Again, personally, it's not my favorite ability, but I think Blizzard is trying to buff, or they're trying to make it feel a bit more usable by making a tier set that is purely based on Unleash Life, and it also increases the direct heal of Unleash Life. Again, I did not get to test it, but I'm assuming that in Blizzard's mind, if Unleash Life initial heal feels more impactful, it should feel more fun to use. But my counterpoint would be what happens in Season 2 when you're going to lose the tier set bonus and Unleash Life is not going to have the same impact anymore. I feel like Blizzard should focus more in terms of a long-term solution of adding additional complexity to Resto Shaman. Now, they did rework Ascendance in a significant way, and honestly, this mini gameplay loop where you press Riptide, that means your next chain heal or healing wave is going to be an instant cast and also apply a Riptide, actually felt fun to play around, and the amount of Riptides you're getting was actually really fun to see. And I really like the new Ascendance, because the previous Ascendance, maybe the numbers were good and all that, but the gameplay wise, I like the new Ascendance. I think the new rework has been fun. I've tested it out. I think it is something in the right direction. So Resto Shaman overall felt like, again, there is a lot of passive healing for Resto Shaman, because if you look at the Apex talents in terms of the Stormstream Totem, this basically adds an additional, it is an RNG based, which is something that I'm not really fond of, because it's tied into your Riptide usage, and when you get the proc of Stormstream Totem, again, you have to remember, if you have all the points invested into it, it builds on top of your healing stream. So it doesn't actually replace healing stream, it builds on top, and you get additional totem to place down, which is going to provide additional passive healing. So it is something that if you get the proc off, it feels really nice, and if you don't get the proc during some of these heavy intensive healing moments, it feels really bad. And this is why I'm going to refer to Preservation Evoker Apex talents, which in my eyes are implemented in a much better way. They have both RNG, but they also have a consistent way of proccing the Apex talents, and we'll talk about that later on. So Stormstream Totem, the RNG element, not a huge fan of it, but when you get the proc, it feels good. Again, that's maybe the gambler in me. So the summary of Resto Shaman for me, and again, I tested Fireseer and Totemic, and I can tell you right now, there is a lot of negativity about Resto Shaman. I do think that recent changes, especially the Ascendance change, was actually really nice, and I think it is going to bring a bit more interesting gameplay. Unleash Life, and again, the fact that it's tied into the tier set, borrowed power, we'll have to see how that's going to work out in the future. But I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people complaining about Resto Shaman, but I also know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to play Resto Shaman because it is a chill healer. It still provides a really, really good raid buff. It still has an interrupt, the only healer that has an interrupt in there. It still provides a decent amount of utility. You have Bloodlust and all those things. You are losing a couple of things, and there is a lot of passive healing available, especially for things like Totemic, where you have talents like Split Stream, which again has been renamed in Midnight. But I know there will be people swapping to Resto Shaman, having a chill time, still providing good utility. Am I happy about all the changes to Resto Shaman? Not really. I am a Cloudburst Totem enjoyer, and I still wish there would be a choice available there, whether you run Cloudburst Totem or not, but the sky is not falling for me. I still had a fun time with Resto Shaman. I don't hate the passive healing playstyle. It's something that I got used to, especially when I was playing Totemic in Season 2 of The War Within. I know there will be people who are upset about this, but I also know there's going to be a large amount of the player base who will enjoy how chill it is. So let's talk about Restoration Druid, and I got to test Druid a bit more in these dungeons just to check out how the abilities feel, or how does the pruning feel. Now, Resto Druid got some of its hot removed. Blizzard did account for the fact that there's less hots, so they kind of compensated above your mastery in order to compensate for that. They removed or merged some of the abilities. I really like the fact that if you are running something like life trading, you don't have to press a fluorescence anymore. You just have to press life bloom on a person. And initially, you might be like, if I press life bloom on a person, there's going to be a fluorescence underneath them. That fluorescence is recast every couple of seconds, so it kind of adjusts to where the player is, which I thought was actually really nice. Outside of that, you look at the fact that Grove Guardians is now passively proc from Wild Growth or Swift Mend. You also have to look at the power of the Archdruid. It's tied into Soul of the Forest. Now keep in mind, Soul of the Forest does not have the Wild Growth portion anymore, and Power of the Archdruid doesn't have that RNG elements. A lot of these changes are honestly a W in my books, and I was testing it in some of these dungeons, and it felt like this is the best way I can describe it. Resto Druid changes in Midnight felt like a cleaned up version of Druid. It felt less intensive. You have to remember, you don't have double life blooms anymore. I can tell you right now, in retail, you are playing double life blooms in Mythic Plus content, in some of the raid fights, again, depending on the build you're running, and it requires a lot of micromanagement. Only having a single life bloom, again, it's kind of sad for me to lose double life blooms because I did kind of like that micromanagement, but I can also see it's going to simplify your gameplay as Resto Druid, and I think there's a lot of people who might enjoy that. Let me know how you feel about that, especially considering the fact that the Apex talents are all to do with Life Bloom. Now, the Apex talents for Resto Druid, in my opinion, are extremely bland when compared to some of the Apex talents other healers received. These Apex talents are all around your Life Bloom, and if you don't have a good uptime of Life Bloom, you're going to suffer a lot. And the reason I'm saying that, because of default raid frames, it can sometimes be hard to really notice which person has Life Bloom, but that might be improved in the future. So a lot of emphasis on Life Bloom. You don't have double Life Bloom in terms of less micromanagement now, which might be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you ask. In terms of Grove Guardians, you don't have to press that. It's just passively procs from your Wild Growth or Swift Mend. And it just feels like you can focus on other things a bit more. You have to remember, I was trying out Wildstalker. There is emphasis, or there is still emphasis to try and do kitty weaving. Kitty weaving for Resto Druid is probably one of the most difficult things in terms of adding additional DPS when compared to some of the other healers, so there's still that complexity. I did try out Keeper of the Grove. There is a lot of this kind of, hey, we're bringing portions of your Season 3 tier set and we're putting it into your hero builds. And that is across the board for all the healers out there. Now, I'm not sure which is the best build or what is going to be the best hero build, but overall, it just felt cleaner to play. And honestly, it's something that I need to test a bit more specifically in raid. I want to know your opinion about this. They're removing wildwood roots. And this is a pretty significant removal because, especially in raid content, you get a lot of rejuves out and then you're spamming your regrowths at a really quick rate. Now, that can feel really cool because I don't tend to raid with my Resto Druid as much in retail, so I want to know the opinions of the Resto Druid raid mates. Are you going to miss that quick regrowths that you can get by placing a lot of rejuvenations on your raid? Because initially it feels really cool, but on the other hand, your hand can really get sprained after doing multiple bosses or a long raid night. I want to know your opinion. Now let's talk about Preservation Evoker, and this one has a list of changes that are extremely impactful in my opinion, because initially if you look at the fact that Spirit Bloom is no longer there, you might be like, wow, Spirit Bloom is not there, but it actually is kind of baked into the spec with the new Apex talents in terms of Meritra's Blessing. And this works in terms of some of the RNG elements, because if you read it, Essence abilities have a chance to infuse your next reversion with the power of the green Dragonflight, upgrading it to Meritra's Blessing. So that means when it procs, your reversion actually changes its icon and it glows and you can clearly see it. And that means your version is basically going to shoot out another version of Spirit Bloom that's going to be instant cast. And that actually felt really, really fun. Because first of all, you have a chance of proccing it from using Essence abilities. And Echo is an Essence ability and you use Echo quite frequently. So the amount of procs that I was getting was a lot more than I initially expected. And if you don't want to rely on that RNG aspect, you also have to look at the fact that Dream Breath's instant healing is increased by 125%. And Dream Breath has a 100% chance to grant Meritra's Blessing. So that means You can proc it by using your Dream Breath, or you can proc it by using your Essence abilities, and this is what I meant in terms of talking about Resto Shaman Apex talents in terms of the Storm Stream totem. There should be a 100% guaranteed way of doing it in order to reduce some of the RNG so you don't feel bad when you don't get it, but that's just my honest opinion. Out of some other changes, again, you're losing things like Emerald Communion, and Gulf is no longer there, and Flame Shaper now gives you multiple charges of Dream Breath and Fire Breath. I did test out on Gulf a bit more, but I really, or how to say, I tested out Flame Shaper a bit, but I want to test out Flame Shaper in Raid to see how it feels. So a lot of my testing was done with Chrono Warden, and one of the things that I really missed out on is the fact that you can no longer echo your life bites. So that's something that I'm still trying to adjust to, and it's just something that I need to get used to it. I was a big fan of that. So in terms of other things, Call of Viscera is now a passive talent. It doesn't have this whole thing where you have to press Verdant Embrace and then that's going to buff your next Dream Breath. Or for example, if you have a stasis that's about to come out and you have a Dream Breath in stasis, you might press your Verdant Embrace to get Call of Viscera, press your stasis, and that's going to buff the Dream Breath. You no longer have to do any of this because it is now a passive talent. This is Blizzard's way of simplifying the spec, and honestly, I don't mind this at all. You know why? Because this kind of frees up my Verdant Embraces in terms of how I want to use it. And there's a lot of emphasis on Verdant Embrace. There's new talents with Verdant Embrace. There's a tier set based on it. I'm not sure what the best build is going to be, but honestly, I had a surprisingly, I don't want to say surprisingly fun, because initially I was scared about the removal of Spirit Bloom, but the fact that Spirit Bloom is baked into your Apex talents, again, a more convenient version of Spirit Bloom is baked into your Apex talents because it's instant cast. It is proc based, but it's also a 100% way of procking it as well, or there is a way of doing it. It's also worth noting this interaction. I activate my stasis, I press my Temporal Anomaly, I press my Dream Breath, and then I press my Reversion, which actually is Maritra's Blessing. You can see it by the icon, and that is stored in my stasis. You can see it here when I release it. I get my Temporal Anomaly, I get my Dream Breath, and then I get this Maritra's Blessing showing up. Again, this is testing on alpha servers. I'm not sure if this is going to change. Maybe I'm making some mistake here, but it is definitely worth noting this interaction. I was really surprised, and I had a fun time with Preservation Evoker. You also have a 40-yard Dream Breath. Now, I need to test Preservation Evoker, specifically Flame Shaper, a bit more in something like raid content to see how it feels, because I did like the whole oomph that you get from Engulf in the War Within. It was an insane amount of healing. So I'm not sure how that's going to appeal to me. But overall, out of the 3 healers that I tested, I probably had the most fun with Pres Evoker out of the testing. I need to test more healers and I need to test them in raiding situation. But that's just my initial opinion based on some of the early testing. Let me know how you feel about all of these changes. Let me know about Apex talents. Which ones do you feel are your most fun or most interesting one? There's some Apex talents that are just really bland. Let me know how you feel about this. If you want to be updated with further videos, and I'm going to do a lot more healer videos in the future, make sure to subscribe and like the content, and I'll see you in my next video.